Let the dance of the dragons begin. The House of the Dragon finale delivers on the Game of Thrones habit of killing off characters in shocking fashion, and this time it's gonna lead to all-out war. Directed by Greg Yaitanes, the Black Queen ratchets up the tensions between the Greens and the Blacks past the exploding point, and that means it's time for blood and cheese. We'll break down what that even is and why it's important, plus the idea of a mysterious new dragon and why Daemon was singing to it. But before we get to all of that, I have to warn you, we are about to spoil this whole episode and what we think is coming in season 2, so if you haven't seen it yet or you just don't want to know, now would be the time to hop on that little teenage dragon of yours and make for clear skies. Just watch out for rogue princes on ancient war dragons, that's all I'm saying. Okay, now that we're past the spoiler warning, let's jump right in. Prince Lucerys Verlaryon and his young dragon Erex are killed by Vhagar, the largest dragon in the world, ridden by Prince Aemond Targaryen, who immediately after was like, He knows that he just kicked off a major war, and also, he's a kinslayer now. In this episode as well, Rhaenyra is crowned queen by her supporters, and even Rhaenys, the queen who never was, joins her side. Starting off at the top of the episode, Rhaenys, who controversially didn't barbecue all the greens, tells Rhaenyra what happened and that she's got to make moves now. Daemon suspects foul play over his brother's death despite him looking like he died 10 years ago, and apparently reads Twitter because he asks why Rhaenys didn't just burn all of them. Before Rhaenyra can make any meaningful choice, she immediately suffers a premature stillbirth in another of the show's signature awful birth scenes. Not only are she and Daemon devastated by the loss of the child, it draws back to her mother's fate at the beginning of the season. Birthing children is a battleground, yes, but Rhaenyra's the lucky sort who has two kinds of battlegrounds to worry about. They hold a pyre funeral for the baby, perhaps her lowest moment to date, when Sir Eric Cargill arrives with a crown, that of Viserys and the old king before him. He pledges to support Rhaenyra as queen, and everyone kneels as Daemon crowns her, turning her sadness into an impromptu coronation. Everyone kneels, except Rhaenys, that is. You may recall that sort of thing as a sore spot for her, and she's waiting on Corlys anyway. Rhaenyra's camp gathers around the most awesome, best gaming table ever and discuss what to do. They consider their enemies, the Lannisters and Hightowers, and potential allies, the Arryns, Starks, and Baratheons. Daemon also brings up air support, the dragons on their side, and it's extremely important to him that they mobilize Dragonstone's 13 total against King's Landing's 4. Alicent, having won a largely dumb race to tell Aegon what to do first, and therefore that's what he'll do, has sent terms to Rhaenyra to bend the knee to Aegon via Otto, who you'll remember was in favor of murdering Rhaenyra and Daemon last episode. Daemon really thinks hard about his response.
I would rather feed my sons to the dragons than have them carry shields and caps. For your drunken usurper of a king.
Despite personal dickishness, Otto also brings the page Rhaenyra tore from the history book she and Alicent were reading in episode 1 in another nod to where we started, which Rhaenyra is moved by. And also Daemon again.
She can have her answer now, stuffed in her father's mouth along with his withered Let's end this mama's farm.
Despite what he and probably a lot of the audience have wanted since the end of episode 9, Rhaenyra, along with Alicent and Rhaenys for that matter, would really prefer to settle this without more murders. Fine, I guess. While she showed strength on Syrax's back, in private, Rhaenyra is wavering on what to do despite her father's crown atop her head. She still loves Alicent, and more importantly, her duty is to honor the oath to protect the realm before her personal ambition for the throne. Daemon outright rejects this idea. They stole her birthright and usurped the throne. And in case you thought Daemon was a good husband now, he chokes Rhaenyra until she says, "Uncle." Ah, just kidding. This is a depiction of abuse. Targaryen power is always number one for Daemon, before both Viserys and Rhaenyra, apparently. She invokes the Song of Ice and Fire, the prophecy Viserys bound her to, and realizes he never told Daemon. He never told anyone but her. And can I recap for a second to point out, how stupid this is? Why does it need to be secret to be effective? Literally, tell everyone. Make it the house motto. Write the whole thing out in common language on the sigil. There's no reason to be secretive. Anyway, just then, who shows up but Lord Corlys? Not dead and ready to commit Valyrian forces to Rhaenyra's side after Rhaenys, who had seemed sort of neutral, spoke up, supporting Rhaenyra and praising her restraint. Also now is when we realize Vaemond died for no good reason at all, and that Corlys took care of the Triarchy. This is great news because that means they control the Narrow Sea, and because I'm sick of hearing about the Triarchy. The matter of getting great houses to declare for Rhaenyra needs to be settled. Wouldn't it be cool if your son showed up as messengers and sick whips, and by that I mean dragons? Asks Jace. Great idea. Certainly gonna work out well for everyone. Jace will go north, and Luke will fly south to Storm's End, which is considered the easier job for gentler little brother Luke. Daemon, eager to become the internet's boyfriend again, despite the act of violence against his wife niece earlier, sings a song in Old Valyrian to a massive riderless dragon, Vermithor, who I'm very excited to tell you more about in the next section of this video. Meanwhile, the Wish.com version of Daemon, Aemond, is waiting in the Great Hall at Storm's End when Luke arrives to entreat with Borros Baratheon, the current Lord of Storm's End and son of the Elder Baratheon who bent the knee to young Rhaenyra. Turns out this isn't the easier job because Borros is ignoring the promise pledging to Aegon II in return for Aemond's pact to marry one of his daughters, an offer Luke doesn't meet since he's engaged to Rhaena. Aemond demands one of Luke's eyes and even shows us why his marker in the opening credits is a sapphire. Ta-da! Lord Zach Galifianakis orders no fighting in his hall and Luke leaves, even though it's rainy and awful dragon flying weather. It's very tense as Aemond shows up trying to unnerve little Luke and Arax. How much bigger Vhagar is than Arax can't be overstated. There's no way Luke can win. He's got to get away. This scene looks almost like a Harry Potter versus Lucius Malfoy Quidditch match, except instead of a broom, Malfoy is riding on the top of a commercial airliner. Aemond gives chase into a canyon which Vhagar can't fit, and Luke makes it out. Arax, scared and not battle-tested, disobeys and shoots fire at Vhagar, and Vhagar, very battle-experienced unlike her rider, disobeys too. Arax makes it to a beautiful clearing. It's nice, until he and Luke get eaten whole by a huge damn dragon. We can see in Aemond's face he knows he's made the biggest mistake of his life. We cut to Dragonstone where Rhaenyra learns what happened. We can see in her face that the time for peace is now over. The storm is broken, and it's time to dance. End of season. The real fight starts in Season 2, and we have a roadmap for what's going to go down. Heads up, I will be referring to fire and blood as source material in this section. While Rhaenys caught a lot of flack for not burning the usurping Greens alive at the end of episode 9, the finale does heavy lifting explaining why. Rhaenys, like Rhaenyra, doesn't want to resort to violence unless it's necessary. Not only does it risk the lives of one's children, if you kill first, it turns you into the monster, or the Queen of Ashes, or the Kinslayer, which is a huge no-no for Targaryens especially. And the fact that Aemond did this, to Rhaenyra's son at that, it means major consequences. The line is broken. Book readers knew exactly what was coming for little Luke as soon as the previews hit last week, even if it went down more as an accident in the show's telling. It actually doesn't matter if it was an accident or not. Aemond accidentally feeding Luke to his dragon is just as improbable as Viserys saying he wanted Aegon II to be king 5 seconds before his death, and you saw Rhaenyra's face. It's on. The book calls it A Son for a Son, and readers call it Blood and Cheese. It is clear Rhaenyra is pissed her beloved son is killed, which means Daemon will enact a plan to kill one of Aegon's sons by means of 2 ne'er-do-wells nicknamed Blood and Cheese. As we all know, Aegon is a garbage person and not a caring father to say the least. Helaena will ultimately be the one who suffers from this murder, aside from the child, that is. It's a shame to see more innocent, good characters like Helaena and Luke pay unbelievable prices in all this fighting, but that's what happens when the dragons dance. Can you imagine how fast they'd put down the Night King if the Targaryens didn't fight and kill off all their dragons? They'd be destroyed. I digress. After Blood and Cheese, which will probably be right away in season 2, Daemon and possibly Jace will have a lot more to do. Daemon's song was to Vermithor, second largest dragon in existence at the time, formerly written by the old King Jaehaerys and currently written by no one. He was appealing to the old dragon through a song in High Valyrian. Daemon is likely among the most experienced dragon riders and knows he can't take Vermithor and the other larger riderless dragons by force, but through appealing by old ties dating back to before the Doom. But Daemon can't ride Vermithor, he's already bound to Caraxes. Who could ride all these extra dragons, you ask? Well, it's time for the sowing of the dragon seeds. Dragon seed, or seed, is the nice way of saying Targaryen bastards. You've met one already in the Child Fight Club, and there are probably plenty more around Dragonstone, which is a much more vibrant living place from the Dragonstone you know from Game of Thrones. Rhaenyra's forces will work to get common-born Targaryen-blooded riders to mount the dragons so they can show up in force against Aegon II's side. In Fire and Blood, Daemon easily takes Harrenhal as a place to meet with allies for Rhaenyra's cause and will meet new characters. Chief among them, Alice Rivers, an interesting book character who is either a temptress, a witch, a super old witch, just a bastard of House Strong, or maybe even Melisandre. Who knows? She is an interesting and mysterious character who I hope doesn't get omitted from the on-screen adaptation. Aemond has a fling with her, proving he doesn't really hate House Strong bastards after all. Overall, I expect the fighting to get more physical, fiery, cruel, and brutal. Rhaenyra isn't going to be shedding any more tears for her lost childhood best friend Alicent. What is a torn page to a lost son? Her mad dog husband won't have anything to hold him back anymore, and despite what the internet thinks, Daemon can be quite monstrous. We will be saying hello to many new characters if the showrunners choose to translate them, perhaps Hugh Hammer, Adam Hull, Nettles, and Alice Rivers. But we'll for sure be saying goodbye to some of the ones we already know. In Fire and Blood, it is said the first part of the Dance of the Dragons was fought through quills, through words instead of swords. At the same time, little is said about the interiority of characters like Rhaenys, like Alicent, and even Rhaenyra, relatively speaking, and we know a lot more about how they feel. In House of the Dragon, massive changes were made. Rhaenyra and Alicent truly love each other, and Rhaenys has complicated feelings about the Queen Who Never Was, about Rhaenyra and Corlys. They all seem to be in favor of de-escalation, and on one hand you can argue they're being stupid and have lost agency, coming off as weak woman characters, but on the other you can argue they're making the best choices for their families and what they think are the best choices for the kingdom, despite an utterly unfair and self-sabotaging system designed to depower all three of these people for the very dumb reasoning that they're women. The show so far has done a pretty great job of not only setting the record straight, but giving us interesting, highly flawed characters doing their best in difficult moments. Okay, now it's time for the Easter eggs we found. Here's what we got. I mentioned this earlier, but Aemond's symbol in the opening credits is a sapphire to match his eye prosthetic. Other newer symbols include Helaena, a spider, because she loves them, and Aegon's, what appears to be a tied-up naked woman on a dragon egg, because again, he is awful. There's also a fourth cog connected to Alicent, and that's her fourth child, Daeron, who apparently exists, and who we'll meet in season 2. Guess he and his dragon are in Old Town for now. Apparently, Aegon's banner features a three-headed green dragon, while in Fire and Blood it was gold. They're really committing to the greens here, huh? In the book, Rhaenyra's banner is a quartered design honoring House Targaryen, Verlaryon, and Arryn, which is where Rhaenyra's mother Aemma came from, despite her Targaryen white hair. Sea Smoke is apparently still around on Driftmark, riderless. Do yourself a favor and don't think about that one Futurama episode when Fry's dog waited faithfully for his return for the rest of his life. This episode marks the second time a Targaryen has thrown off Otto's Hand of the King pin. Don't worry, he's probably got a whole drawer of them somewhere. In the books, Rhaenyra's stillborn child was deformed and a girl named Visenya, after one of Aegon the Conqueror's wives and the name she chose for her baby brother. She also outright blamed the Greens for killing her instead of the implication in the show. There is a lot of parallelism in this episode against episode 1 and the first half of the season. The page young Rhaenyra and Alicent tore from the book, the horrifying birth and funeral, and there's also the scene on the bridge outside Dragonstone with Daemon and Otto from earlier in the series. Rhaenyra again appears on Dragonback on the same side of the bridge, but not on the same side of the conflict. Rhaenyra's face at the end of the episode is also a parallel to young Rhaenyra's face at the end of episode 1 when everyone is bending the knee. She has no idea what is to come from this. In yet another nod to the past, while Daemon is plotting with the men of Dragonstone and Rhaenyra is audibly suffering through the birth, someone asks him if he wants to see a maester and he flinches. This is not unlike the times with Aemma and Laena where they ultimately died. Further on that note, Viserys episode 1 comment that it's an illusion that the Targaryens control the dragons pops up again, with Daemon tentatively trying to charm Vermithor with a song, and Aemond's whole thing with killing his cousin. By the way, it's Daemon who gives the news of what happened to Luke to Rhaenyra. How did he know? Well, there's two options. Aemond told Alicent and it got whispered back through his or Mysaria's people is one. The behind the episode lays tracks for the other option, saying Aemond's last vestiges of childhood left him in that moment and he's got to make a decision if he's going to commit to this. He probably does, projecting himself as having done it on purpose as the new resident tough guy in the Greens. This is closer to book Aemond and probably who he'll act like in season 2. Rhaenyra invokes not wanting to burn down King's Landing and becoming the queen of Ash and Bone, which another platinum blonde woman will mull over in this very location in the future. Notably, by the time of Game of Thrones, the painted table is moved to the room that is currently Rhaenyra's bedchamber, with the Valyrian steel accented dragon motif on the wall, matching the aged one in Daenerys and Tyrion's time. And my last favorite Easter egg you might already know, but whatever, Grover Tully's name is mentioned at the painted table.
I've already sent ravens to Lord Grover.
House Tully or House Sesame Street? Because some of Grover's relatives include Elmo Tully, Oscar Tully, and Kermit Tully. What a bunch of Muppets. But what do you think of what happened? Is Rhaenyra justified in whatever she does after Luke's death? Is everything between her and Alicent done and gone? Will we get season 2 before The Winds of Winter gets published? Hit us with your best theories down in the comments. Anyway, thanks for watching this episode of Canon Fodder, and for more Canon Fodder deep dives, check out our Black Adam and Rick and Morty videos. And remember to follow and subscribe to IGN wherever you like to watch.